2024 is not over, but it's getting close, and I thought I wanted to recap and just talk about which albums I really liked from this year. So let's get right into it. First off, Bullhead by Slow Hollows. This is a banger album, very slow and airy. It leaves space, but it knows when to fill it. It's super good at pacing, and it's really consistent. Every song stays within that style, but they don't all sound exactly the same. The new Nevadanova album called Canary, it was pretty good. There were a couple songs on there that I didn't like, at least that I was meh on. The whole album overall was really worthwhile and had some really fun sounds on there. And a lot of it was Nevadanova's normal style, which is like this kind of regular sort of rock, shoegaze twang on it. It's really fun. I really loved their earlier stuff. That album they did with Bright Eyes called One Bottle of Wine, Two Jugs or something like that. I can put it on the screen. But this album stuck to that a little bit, but then had its moments where it sort of strayed into a more pop direction or a more rock direction, sometimes punk. Yeah, and overall it was a really fun listen. Next up we have Hell's Welles, which is Jesse Wellis's new album. If the name sounds familiar but you can't quite place it, it's the guy that looks like Mick Jagger on YouTube that sings in fields, and he just plays his songs out in the country, and it's really, really cool. He's a great songwriter. He's just sort of proved himself time and time again, and the amount of song output he has is absolutely insane, and it's super worthwhile stuff. That sort of traditional folk songwriter guy is kind of lost right now. There's like the big poppy country guys like Zach Bryan and Noah Kahan. Those guys are kind of talking about their own personal experiences, and they're sort of connecting with people in a different way than, let's say, John Prine did, or Woody Guthrie, or Arlo Guthrie. Overall, just really, really cool stuff. And it's sort of reviving that character that observes other people's experiences during a sort of fickle time in history and bringing that out into a spotlight, using country or folk music to do that. And we only get like one or two guys like this every couple decades. It was super duper fun to see him rise to the top and see him finally come out with a couple albums and have him just really explore the space he's been given. Next up we have a jazz album. This one is called Moondial by Pat Metheny. Moondial is a really slow, really contemplative, soft, beautiful, beautiful work by Pat Metheny, who's maybe top 5 guitarists for me of all time. He's so good at fostering the sound of love. And on this album there is a lot of great songs, but personal favorite was Londonderry Air, and he also has a really, really great and unique cover of Here, There, and Everywhere by the Beatles. So, jazz fans, this is what I'm feeding you. Next up we have the new Peach Pit called Magpie, and it was... there's a couple songs on here I really love. Out of Here, Am I Your Girl, Your Long Black Hair, and Wax and Wane, and Did You Love Somebody? Those are my favorites. But there's a couple on here that I really just felt neutral towards and didn't even add to my library, which is fine. You know, it doesn't have to be banger after banger. But overall, I'd say the album is very, very good, and the songs that hit really hit. But there's a couple misses in there, in my opinion. But yeah, overall, great to get more Peach Pit content no matter what. Such an amazing artist right now, really developing like the alt rock sphere right now. And Peach Pit is in this really cool space where they're not super popular, so only this like select group of people know about them, but they're popular enough so where if you say the word Peach Pit to somebody, let's say a group of 10 people, at least 1 or 2 people are gonna be like, oh, I love Peach Pit. And that's just kind of like the sweet spot for an artist, because I think once you get too popular, it's really hard it makes a lot of stuff harder just in your life. I don't think being a pop star is admirable, but maybe that's just me. Next up, we have one that's a little bit more niche, by Olivia O, called No Bones, Sickly Sweet. This one, I'm a big fan of Olivia O. For all of you sad girls out there, you are going to feast tonight. All those that love Daffo, all those that love Lana Del Rey, Biba Doobie, PJ Harvey maybe, all the sad girls. If you like sad women singing about sad things and just generally being depressing, Olivia O is for you. My favorite off of this album was It's Easy. It's Easy is a really great track. I love her voice on that track, and she's just a great artist, and I want more people to know about her, so I'm talking about her. Next up, we have Bill Frisell with Orchestras Live. This one, another jazz album. I gotta say, a friend of mine introduced me to Bill Frisell, and it bangs. It's so good. I absolutely love Frisell's style. It's experimental without being erratic. It has a lot of movement, but it's not crowded. It's simply a fantastic album, and it's really great for like just going on a walk and sort of spacing off, and then the music sort of pulls you in and sort of guides your thoughts. It's kind of like meditation music meets jazz, just a little bit. There's a connection there, but it's not super strong. Yeah, super interesting, amazing album. Highly suggest. Alright, the big one. Well, a big one. One of the big ones I'm going to talk about is the new Vampire Weekend, called Only God Was Above Us. And oh my god, it is a banger. It is such a banger. My favorite track is Connect. I love this track. It has a classical piano intro, and then it fuses with choir and pop and rock and alternative, and it's so exciting to listen to. The whole album is deeply inspired. The one word I would use would be inspired. It knows exactly what it's trying to do, and it executes it perfectly. It is an amazing, amazing album, and you should really listen to it if you haven't already. Next up, we have STRFKR. That's the artist name. I don't know how to pronounce it. Maybe Sturfker? Anyway, their album Parallel Realms came out this year, and it was so good. It came out earlier this year, and I listened to a couple songs, and I was like, oh my god, this is so good. And I just had to find out where it came from, so I listened to the whole album, and it was just so fun and so great. It's like, imagine Current Joys style, if you know who that is, and mix it with dance and like disco. It's like funky Current Joys. That's the best way I can describe it. It's definitely closer to the pop realm, but it's really quality pop, and it's like funky, dude. It has heat, you know? It has electric soul, and it's just bumping. It's just bumping. It's so fun. It's really, yeah, that's the best way to describe it, is fun music. It's like the modern Madonna or something. It's really cool. We cannot forget Patchwork, Jesse Willis's other album. All the things that I said about the first album apply to this one. Genius songwriting and all that. So we can move on. This one's technically an EP, but blew me away. The Poetic Edda by Synestia and the Disembodied Tyrant. This EP is so good. This is metal, so for those that are not fans of metal, be prepared. This is not for you, because this is heavy. This is very heavy metal. But the fans of classical that may be watching this could be for you. If you don't mind some heavier, and it's heavy, some heavier stuff, then I would seriously check out the Poetic Edda, because it's a retelling of this battle, and it's deeply inspired by the Four Seasons, and it blatantly uses a lot of the music, but it reconstructs it in this really interesting way to fit this new genre. My friend introduced me to it, and when we were listening to it together, every couple seconds it was like we were both widening our eyes in awe at how amazing an instrumental was, or how insane the vocalist was going. It's just such a unique experience, and I highly suggest all those classical or metal fans bear witness to this because it is unique and amazing. Next up, we have another niche one, niche-ish. Some Things Change, Others Stay the Same by Housecat. I've followed Housecat for pretty long time now. This has to be his best album when it comes to blatant quality. His best lyrics so far, and in the past, I don't want to be too harsh, but his lyrics have been pretty bland. All about a girl or a relationship or something like that, something along those lines. He does go into his relationships, but he also goes into much deeper things. And the opening track is called The Stranger, and I noticed a lot of absurdist themes. Housecat actually does all of the animation and music for a little YouTube channel called Sisyphus55, which is amazing. Really cool channel, which I've also followed for a long time. And that's how most people find out about Housecat. They're a lot more popular than Housecat as a musician, but if you've seen those videos, you should definitely check out Housecat. His jazz is really great, but this is folk, just so you know. It's very folky, and he experiments musically too, not just with his lyrics, but his music gets pretty out there, which I'm super happy with, because it always felt to me like Housecat had this huge amassed potential behind him, but he wasn't fully tapping into it. And this, it just feels like he grabbed a chunk of it and threw it into his music, but there's still this mass. I would definitely check out this album, but his future albums I think are going to get better and better, so I'm very excited for that. We have a surprising amount of jazz albums on here, because this next one is Speak to Me by Julian Lage. This one is amazing. Anything that you could possibly want out of a jazz album, this is it. Genre bending, absolutely. There's like country on here, and it's super cool. This album is super unique, and Julian Lage proves time and time again that he's a musical genius. And he's probably my favorite jazz artist right now, but I don't want to say that with a ton of confidence, just because there's so many great ones that are making albums right now. But this one's definitely up there. It has a huge scope as an album. It's so aspirational, and I think it sticks the landing really well. This one is one that it's really hard to describe, and you just have to listen to it. So if you like jazz or anything that's experiments with genre, definitely check this out. Time to talk about some stuff that I did not like. I mentioned Current Joys earlier. Current Joys came out with a new album called East My Love. I didn't love it. I mean, I love that it's different from his other albums, and I love that it's unique. Current Joys is one of my favorite artists, and it was super disappointing to see his music kind of lose what I liked about it in this album. I'm all for him experimenting. I really love that it was different from his other albums, but it seems like he removed the sparkle that his music was about, you know? And pretty much every song on Wild Heart is like one of my favorite songs. I love that album. It felt removed, you know? I don't know if that makes sense, but it's how it felt. There's definitely some good songs on there regardless, and I think the overall experimentation, like I said, is just a really good sign to see from Current Joys, because his style stayed very much the same up until this point. So hopefully he can get that sparkle back in what was special about his music, while still tapping into this folk experimentation we saw with this album. Next up, The Voids, Like All Before You. Now this one I think is overall a great album, but why I didn't like it? Simply because the auto-tune I thought was overused, and because we've seen him give such great vocal performances in the Strokes, it felt like a hindrance. It always felt like it was in the way, as opposed to aiding him. There's definitely some moments in this album where he uses the auto-tune, and it just hits. It aids him. But those moments seem sort of few and far between. But overall, musically, I think it's great. I love the cover art on this album. Musically great. All of the instruments are in perfect unison, but that style choice about the auto-tune, for me, is just, it's not what I'm looking for in music. But if auto-tune doesn't bother you, then this album is a banger. I suggest you check it out. Next up, we have Luck and Strange by David Gilmour. David Gilmour has been getting a little bit more credit these days for being just an amazing guitarist. For whatever reason, at least that's what I'm seeing online. This is surprisingly good. Honestly, the tracks can be a little bit hit or miss, but overall, I'd say it's a great album. Sometimes it feels like filler. He pulls you back in with a lot of power and with a lot of, it is powerful music, but it's, slow and climbing and brooding. It doesn't feel as full as the stuff with Pink Floyd, but it feels good. It feels overall like nothing's wrong, So I wouldn't consider it perfect, and I prefer Pink Floyd stuff, but I mean, comparison is the thief of joy, right? So overall, I would suggest it. I would suggest it to anyone who listened to Pink Floyd, but you're probably not gonna like it as much. Another album that's a big deal right now is Songs of a Lost World by The Cure. Let's talk about it. I definitely like the earlier stuff. That could be kind of hard to hear when it's such an important album and it comes from such an emotional place, because this is an album about death at its core, and it's an album about dying alone. That's what the opening track is about. That's a hard pill to swallow. And in classic Cure fashion, there's songs that go on very long, there's songs that don't. But the drums, I found repetitive. Maybe it's just a problem with goth music in general, which I love goth music. Don't kill me. The classic goth music drum pattern where it's like, you have the one snare that rings out super long and you bass, snare, bass, snare. It's everywhere in goth music. It's a great drum beat, but it does get a little bit old. Other than that, it's a great album, and it has a lot to offer lyrically and musically. It gives us new content from The Cure, which is really, really amazing. Who can possibly complain at more songs from The Cure? Great album. Sky 100 by Parannoul. I love Parannoul. I only discovered them a couple weeks ago, but I've listened to, I forget what the album is called, but it's got the blue sky and the steam coming out of that pipe. I loved that album, and then I listened to this one, and both are bangers. But this one, let's talk about this one. They can get a little bit noise rock for me, but they only do that on a couple tracks, like one or two. Yeah, I'm not a fan of when the sound is too crowded. I can do with some tightly packed instrumentation, but when it's really packed, I get put off a little bit. But outside of that, this album is fantastic. There's sort of an ambient quality, like if you listen to it from start to finish, you get a real experience, and it's almost like you're stepping through somebody's life and hearing what they heard being set to music, and it really is like you're fading with a memory, and you get to experience what it's like to fade, and it's really beautiful. I love this album. This is one of my highest recommendations on this list so far. Frogs in Boiling Water by Div. I love Div. I discovered them through this album, and it is a banger. A total banger. Such an interesting sound. Div has always been unique and at the front lines of redefining rock for the short time that they've been together. I'm so glad that they dropped this album, because it has made so many of my afternoon or night walks just feel amazing, and this album just glows, and it doesn't feel too modern, It feels like their older stuff, but pushed forward in, not in time, but in progression, it pushed it forward in music, but not in style, if that makes sense. It's like they did a great job at avoiding all of the pitfalls that you can fall into when you're a band that's been around for a while and are still making music now. They avoided those pitfalls masterfully. And not only did they avoid mistakes, they exceeded my average expectations for a Div album. It's a fantastic album, and I highly suggest you all check it out. And that is an album recap of this year, 2024. If you have any album suggestions for me or any other commenters, please put them down in the comments. I would love to see them. Thank you so much for watching. See you later.